So if you'd like to follow the full Instagram, sorry, not Instagram, YouTube tutorial for this or masterclass for this, you can follow us at 343 youtube.com/343 labs. And I'm also there, and you can see my full hands with the full music production stuff over there. Oh, there I am. That's cool. Awesome. There is my palm. And now I will have two hands popping up shortly. So cool. Awesome. So should we get going? Or awesome. Cool. Yeah, sure. Sounds good. So hi everyone, my name's Claire. Really happy to be here today at 343 Labs. What you might notice is that you can only see my hands, and that's because I'm going to be playing and showing you the ins and outs of Push today. Push is an instrument that I have in front of me over here that I've started to use a lot when I got into music production initially, and I continue to use it now as regularly as part of my production and performance things that I do on a regular basis. So once again, my name's Claire. I also go by dolltr, which is my artist name. I'm a 343 Labs instructor where I mainly teach Live Push, and I've also got some really exciting online courses that are coming up soon after this. We at 343 Labs, we do a lot of things related to music production in general. So some of our classes also involve Logic. Some of them involve songwriting, which is really important as a skill to have. And I'm really happy that I can contribute to the 343 family as an Ableton Certified Trainer as well. So really happy to be sharing with y'all today about the ins and outs of Push. This masterclass is called Push 101 because we're really going to take a look at Push for the very first time for those of us who maybe haven't gotten into it too much. And we're going to look at ways to use it in production and performance. So let's start getting into it. Just overall, what we see over here is Push 2 specifically. Ableton released Push 2, which is a piece of hardware that they created in 2015, and it's the follow-up model to Push, the original Push, which is Push 1, that was created a few years before that. The idea is Push 2 is supposed to be an instrument, which is what Ableton often describes it as, that lets you control hands-on by using hardware, things like melody and harmony, beats and samples, sounds, and when you're in the right mode to do certain things, you're going to be able to do controllers of like your song structure and your arrangement. That's what we'll call it. But it basically lets you have complete control over session view and is really useful for being able to piece together musical ideas, especially if you're just in kind of like the preliminary stages of starting to explore, starting to bring ideas together. Also, really quickly before we move forward, Thomas from 343 Labs is in the room with me. So yay, Thomas, give Thomas a hand. But if we do have any questions come up at any point in time, Thomas is going to let me know and we'll see if we can get to your questions. So thanks, Thomas. Major shout out to Thomas. But cool, let's get started with Push. One thing that we can do, like I said, is quickly populate session view, which is the view that you see of Ableton Live now. If you are currently following our stream on YouTube, you'll be able to see the full view of Live as well as me using Push. So these two tracks over here that I have on Push, you'll also notice that they are mirrored in session view in Live. And that kind of takes us into an exploration of what Push physically is. It's solid, as you can see. I just knocked on it and it stayed pretty neat. Yeah, hey to everyone who's on the 343 Labs chat on YouTube. Hi everyone, thanks for tuning in. So let's take an overview again of like the hardware of Push, and we'll go a bit more in depth into exploring Push's functionality as we move along tonight. But let's take a little bit of a tour. So we have a bunch of knobs on the top of Push. We have 8 knobs centered over here, and then we have 2 on the left and 1 on the right. This one on the right here is going to be a very important control. If you are looking at my Push LED screen over here, you'll see something that says I'm controlling master volume, and this is indeed the master volume knob. So let's reset that back to around 0, which is the default. We have 2 other knobs also. We have one on the top left that is a tempo knob, essentially. So when I'm twisting this, you can see tempo start to change on Push. And for the sake of today, let's maybe set this to 150. I'm feeling a little bit 150. Maybe we'll make something along that tempo. And the knob that's right to its right, is the knob that controls swing. So that lets you control how much you're swinging or how much groove you're giving to something, depending on the kind of groove that you have. And we'll also take a look at that more in depth later as we go along. Those are the knobs, and below the knobs, you'll notice that we have a nice, lovely LED screen over here. So this is the main LED screen where we're going to be able to see what is happening in live. It's kind of like, I like to think of it as a little bit of a bridge between the hardware world and the software world. And through using the LED screen and its different views, we're able to control different parameters of live and have a better understanding of how we're controlling live, except through a hardware version. On top and below the LED screen, we have 2 rows of 8 buttons. These are soft buttons that will change depending on what we would like to do with them. So they're pretty flexible. They're a little bit like chameleons. They can change colors. They can change functions, which we'll go into later. And that's going to be a very exciting part of Push because of these buttons that keep changing, we're able to get a lot of mileage out of them. Below the soft buttons, we have even more buttons, and these are actually called pads specifically. So this is an 8x8 grid. Altogether, we have 64, and they're kind of divided into sets of 16 each. So we have the top left quadrant, we have this quadrant over here, and we have this quadrant on the lower left, which is really important to us in a minute when we start putting in beats and we start sequencing things into Push. And then we have this lower quadrant over here, and altogether they give us 16 pads that again are chameleons, and they'll change in functionality and change in their color as well. To the left of Push, we have some controls over here that are buttons. All of these things that you see lit up on the live stream, these are actually depressible, and you can choose to press them and have some things play, or you can have some things record on the lower left, depending on what options you have in it. And on the right hand side of Push, we have even more controls. We have things that will allow us to launch specific scenes in session view. And just to demonstrate this very quickly, if I were to say select this very first scene over here in live, this time I'm using my trackpad on this MacBook that I have. If I were to go over and press this top button over here that's currently in green, it corresponds to launching that scene. And if I were to press a lower button, say over here, it also corresponds to launching that scene. And you'll see that also reflected in session view and live. For now, what I'm going to do is just launch the first scene again so that I have it selected, and Push will help me do that as well. And on the right section, we also have some more controls at the bottom. You may not be able to see this super clearly right now, but these 2 lower buttons on the bottom right of Push are called Shift and Select. These are going to be very useful to us as we go along for the rest of this masterclass, as far as swapping out certain functions of Push will be for additional functionality that we can get. So yeah, with that said, let's move on from our tour of physical Push. And one of the best ways that I think we can introduce Push to everyone and really get going and get incorporating it into our workflow is to make a beat. So if that sounds good, let's start making a groove on Push. And I'm going to go ahead and do that with some of the existing things I have on here. So I have 2 MIDI tracks up now, and they're both empty. What I may do for now is I'm going to delete this second MIDI track over here, and this is an introduction to one important function in Push that's called the delete function. So on the top left-hand corner of Push, we have something that's called delete. If I hold that down and if I press on the soft button that is bearing the second track's name, so delete, press, that deletes the track. And again, Push will tell you that track deleted to -MIDI. Now we're left with 1 MIDI track, and let's see if we can load something up on that. I'm going to do this by selecting the MIDI track, making sure I have it in control, and clicking on Add Device. That's going to be on the top right-hand corner of the LED screen specifically, Add Device. So I'm going to click on that, and immediately, if you're familiar with Live, you will see something very familiar populate the LED screen. We have an equivalent of the browser in Live, which is probably one of the most important parts. It's where we find our sounds. It's where we organize our collections from Live 10 onwards, because we have the ability to sort our different sounds as we please. And let's get started by heading over to drums and scrolling through a few of these things. Let's see. What I will also do is, if you notice, I just had if this it's clear to you, may not be too clear, but over here on the second button on the top left of Push, there's something called Preview, and right now it says that it's off. If I turn Preview on, let's see what happens. I actually get a preview of whatever is coming in and It's a little bit like being able to audition the different sounds that I have in all of these drum kits. Cool. So yeah. What I would like to do though is go back, and I think what I will select is just a standard 808 core kit. And I can do this by clicking load to pull it up. Great. So now the 808 core kit is loaded up on this first track. And one thing that I like to do also a lot with Push is keep things organized. I think organization is really great in contributing to how creative you get down the road, because you're able to locate all of your sounds. You want to make sure that they're color coded in a way that makes sense to you, and you can do that straight from Push. So if I were to come over to the bottom right hand corner, like I mentioned, which is our most important corner, if you will, I'm going to hold down Shift and then select the name of this track. And boom, we suddenly get a selection of really wonderful colors. And for me, I feel like drums aren't necessarily a pink, which they are currently color coded, but maybe I would like to color code them a little bit of a brown or a red. For me, I feel that's kind of like a drum type of color. Maybe you feel differently, in which case please color code it differently. But I'm going to hold down Shift and press on the name, and I'm going to color it brown. Let's do that. So now we have a brown kind of kit that's loaded up. And one thing that I will do now is switch over to note mode on Push. On this little section of Push over here, we are able to select the different kinds of modes we're in. Right now we're in session mode on Push, which mirrors session view in Live. But one thing that we can do is switch over to note mode. So I'm going to hit note. And now we notice that we are in a slightly different view. What I will also do is, for the sake of this live stream, change the color of my drum kit again, because it looks like it's not showing up too well on the stream. So I'm going to hold down Shift, select this, and I will select maybe a slightly brighter color, maybe this brighter one over here, and cool, that seems to show up a little bit better. But yeah, so now I have a selection of sounds over here in the lower left quadrant, and let's see what happens if I play through them. Cool, so you'll notice that this is very much a standard drum rack, and you'll also see that it's been loaded up correspondingly in Live as well. In the display, we're able to see what we have selected at the moment. The sample that I last touched was a clap. So we see clap show up over here and underneath the second soft button in the LED display. If I wanted to play in a drum, I would be able to do that. So one way that you can record things into Push is through real-time recording. So if you wanted to do like that could be something that you want to do. Another thing you could do is use this section on top over here. These two top quadrants, when put together, form the step sequencer in Live. And that's going to let us immediately put together a kind of clip that we have. So one way that we can create a clip is to click directly in Ableton Live in any empty clip slot, and that will instantiate a new clip over there. One thing that we can also do is just immediately start sequencing sounds that we would like to sequence into the step sequencer layout of Push. So I'm going to put in some kick drums first. I think it would be cool to start with some kicks. So that's where my kick drums are, and let's put some of those in. Cool. So right now I would also like to put in maybe some claps and snares. So I'm going to select whichever sound I would like to program in. So now I've got the clap selected, and I'm going to put them in here. So this is kind of like a drum and bass type of thing that we have going on. Cool. And now if I were to select a different sound, maybe we can add in some other stuff. Yeah, let's add in this hi-hat over here. What I will do now is activate something that's called repeat. Repeat is this button over here, and I'm going to select it. And let's see if we can observe what happens when I hold down any of these sounds. And in this case, I'm going to hold down this hi-hat over here. So repeat lets me control these hi-hats or whatever sound I would like to play, but in a way that I don't have to keep, pressing on the pad, but I can just hold down this button. And in this case, I'm going to be overdubbing some sounds into this clip that I have over here, which you can also see in Live. So I'm going to press on this button over here that looks like the record button we have in Live, but it's on Push. And once we see the LEDs that are traveling from left to right go red, that means we're overdubbing and we're recording on. So let's do this with the hi-hats. Cool. And if I wanted to exit overdub, I would click on this button again here, and everything turns green. Cool. Looks good. What I would like to do, though, is change up the groove that I currently have. Right now, we're kind of like in a drum and bass type of place, which is awesome. I love drum and bass. But maybe by changing some of the kick programming that I've done, we'll be able to change up this groove a little bit. So I'm going to head over to the kick drum, and you'll notice that I do have the kick drums programmed over here. But what I will do is delete all of the current programming that I have on the kick. So I'm going to hold down the delete button, and this time I'm going to tap on the kick drum pad over here. So delete. Now we are currently left with just the claps as well as the hats that we have. So let's see if we can record some kicks in, just the kicks. And I think the claps are also throwing us a little bit off. So let's go ahead and select the claps again. And another way that we can delete things in the step sequencer is by pressing on them again to kind of take them out. So it's a little similar to your draw mode when you're in live, being able to click on things to put them in and being able to click on them again to remove them. So let's remove these claps over here. So now we've got some hats going, and we've also got the kicks going. And I'm going to overdub some of these again. So here we go. So you'll notice that I played a little bit off. So this little clap over here is a tiny bit too early. What I can do is take him out and re-put him back in here. Cool. Another thing I'd like to do also is make sure that this clap over here, if you're following along with us in on YouTube, you'll be able to see the live interface. So right now I'm going to zoom in to this particular section in live, and you'll see that my clap is a tiny bit off, just a little bit. What is cool to be able to do though is if I could quantize this from push. If only I could do that. And the great news is that I can. So I'm going to zoom out again so that we have the full clip visible to us in Ableton Live. And we're going to go into the quantization settings. So if you look on push's left hand side, you'll be able to see a button that says quantize. So we're going to press that button, and that's going to be able to quantize everything. And we're told that now we're quantized to 100%. To illustrate that again, what I will do is hold down quantize and show you a couple of settings. This is the quantization settings screen that we see in the LED section of push right now if you hold down the quantize button, and you can select different quantization options. So maybe you didn't want to quantize to 100%, maybe you wanted things to be a little bit loose, set that to maybe 50% or so. 55% sounds good. And you can also select whether you want record quantization to be on or off. Record quantization means that whatever I play in is automatically quantized in on the second repeat of that loop. So if I wanted to make everything really tight, say in the context of a live performance, I could choose for my record quantization to be on, but I'm going to leave it off in this case so that we can look more at our quantize settings as we keep moving along in our groove building. Great. So now we have our kick drum set up. We have our groove going. This is kind of like a little bit of a hip hop type of groove. So let's temporarily pause this. And what I will do is I'm going to head over to session over here, press on that. And what I'm going to do is press on this pad right below the current empty clip. And this is going to basically stop that clip. And this way I'm able to control session view because I'm in session mode, which is a really great thing to be able to do. What I will also show in this case is, let's say you wanted to keep moving in the same scene, in the same vertical row that you had been doing. One way that you can do this is if you were to launch this entire row. But if you wanted to temporarily mute this track, just like you could use your track activator buttons in live, you can also mute this from push. So by holding down the mute button and then selecting that track, I'm going to be able to mute the track. So here we go. Cool. So now we don't hear the drums, but if I wanted to, I could turn on something that's called a metronome. And a metronome is very similar to a click track. It's actually the same thing, just by a different name. And if I wanted to turn on the metronome from Push itself, there's a little button over here called metronome. So let's click on that. And there, I can hear the metronome playing for me, which may be useful later on. So I'm going to temporarily turn it off. But right now, in addition to my drums, I would really like to add on, say, a different kind of instrument. So before I add this different instrument, maybe just a quick suggestion for people on the chat on YouTube. If you have any specific musical parts that you would like me to add to this little groove that we have, go ahead and tell us in the chat and give us a shout out, and Thomas will tell me what parts we can add on. For now though, I will add on an additional track that's going to be a bass sound. So I'm going to I'm going to click on a button over here that says add track. And I'll have the option to add a different sound. So I'm going to scroll down over here to sounds in the browser again. And I will I'm going to select a sound that I like. And I know that I do like this particular sound that's called bass housey. So I'm going to load it up on here. And cool. I'm also going to switch over into note mode, which is over here. And I'm going to change this to a different color because for me, basses in my head are blue. So I'm going to hold down Shift, select the name of that, and blue. Yay, blue bass. Cool. So now this is a different layout from when we were looking at our drum track that we had. When we were looking at our drum track, this is in a drum rack in Live. So this is a specific container that comes in Ableton Live, if you will, that lets you contain samples and drum sounds more often than not. But when I switch over to my bass track, this is a different kind of layout, and this is a melodic type of layout. So let's see what happens if I were to play across the bottom of Push from left to right. So we have... Great. So this is actually a major scale. If we listen to it again, it's a C major scale in particular. And one thing that you might have noticed also is that as I was playing from left to right, we had a couple of things sneaking over here. So I'm going to play one more time from left to right, and we'll see if we can make some observations about which pads are lit up in green. So let's look out for the green pads. So now I'm holding down this note, and we have 3 copies of the same note that's coming up in green. All of these are the exact same pitch, and that's because the way Push is currently laid out, I can not only play notes this way, I can also play notes up in thirds. So for example, if I wanted to play the same scale or same set of 8 notes that I had, that lets me do that. And of course, then we ask ourselves the question, like, can I only play these notes? Like, this seems so limiting for an instrument that claims to be an all-in-one production type of piece of hardware. That's quite terrible. We shouldn't have to deal with that. So one thing that we, of course, can do is change the scale and change the way that we're dealing with these notes that we have over here. So I'm going to go over here and select a button that's called Scale. So let's go over here, and now immediately on Push, on the LED screen, we see some new things reflected. We see a bunch of different scales, and we also see, oops, I accidentally touched something. We see the different scales, and we also see on the soft buttons, we have options to select what is called a root note. When we're talking about music theory and we're talking about scales in the context of music theory, when we say the root of a scale is, for example, C, that means that the root note is going to be C for the entire scale. So this will be C. One thing that could change when you're changing types of scales is the root note. So let's say I came over here and instead of C, I selected E flat. Let's see what happens. Now, the note that I'm playing is a different one, and I'll play a higher note so that we hear that. That's going to be an E flat. All of these colored notes that match the color of the track that we were playing with are the root notes. So all of these are E flats, just at different pitches. Some of them are higher, some of them are lower. If I were to select a different root, say E, now this is different. All of these roots are all E's. Playing that gives me an E major scale. And now if I wanted to, I could even select a different kind of scale. So let's see if I use this knob over here in the top left and tweaked it just a little bit. Now I have E minor selected as a scale. So let's see what happens if I play upwards. So this is going to be an E natural minor scale that's going to then be the basis for whatever loop I might play in this case. Yeah, so Thomas has something. Cool.
So the first one is from Nacho, and he said, I want like a 2-note guitar, like indie dance.
Cool. Okay. Awesome.
And then the second is from Regine, and she said she would like it to add some shaker.
Very cool. Okay. So just to repeat that, thank you, Thomas. We had a request from Nacho, who's going to say a 2-note guitar, indie dance kind of thing. And from Regine, she requested for shaker. Cool. And I'll make a personal request to myself, more cowbell, because you can only have more cowbell in that. Great. So we'll get along to that immediately after this. Right now, I'm going to kind of demonstrate how you would, if you want it to be in the key of E minor, which is the key that we're in now, maybe add a different kind of bass part to this. So I'm going to hit scale again to get me out of the scale display, and so that I can see my different things in it. What I will also do is unmute the drum track that I had just now. So I'm going to hold down mute and press on the track again. There we go. Cool. So let's see if we can record some bass. Cool. I'm going to also decrease the octave on push. You can do that over here, just so that I have some lower notes that I can play with. That's pretty good. I think that was pretty good. Okay, cool. So here we go. So you'll notice that I did make a couple of mistakes, and the great thing about using push is that you can always undo. There's an undo button here that mirrors whatever we're hearing in live, so I'm going to hit undo. And the clip is gone. It reverts any last action that you've had in live, which is great news. Another thing that you might have noticed if you were on the live stream watching of us at 343 Labs is that I'm clipping, which is not the best thing to do. The great thing that we can do from push, though, is also mix. So let's head over to the top right-hand corner of push and click on mix. Doing this pulls up the mix view, which will let me bring down some of the levels that I have over here. So I'm going to bring down the drums just a tiny bit. And I'm also going to change the volume a little bit here so that we're just hearing everything correctly. I'm going to bring down the drums, bring down the bass a little bit too, so that we have enough to work with. And then I'm going to switch back to device view, which is also on the top right-hand corner in that quadrant that you see over there. And I'm going to put in some bass sounds. So here we go. Cool. And if you're following along with us on the 343 Labs live stream on YouTube, you'll be able to see my clip that was just recorded into live. You can see it from live, but you can also see clips from push. And on the top right-hand corner, again with device mix, below the word mix, there is something called clip. So let's click on that. And look, now we can actually see all of the notes that we have in this bass loop that we just created for ourselves, which is really awesome. And this is great because now if I click Quantize, we'll be able to see all of these notes move. So I'm going to click Quantize. Here we go. Cool. And something's shifted. If I click Quantize again, which will make things even tighter, we'll see them shift again. And there we go. Cool. So that's one way that you can start working with real-time recording and real-time looping with push, which is a great thing to be able to do. Cool. So let's get on to, first we'll start off with Regine's request for more shaker. Let's head back over to our drum track by selecting it. And I remember that there was a shaker sound somewhere here. Ah, there it is. There's the shaker sound. Cool. So one thing that we could do is maybe add a little bit of shaker over there. One thing that I might do in this case is take away a couple of these hi-hats that we have over here. So let's see if we can get rid of a couple of these. Again, I'm just kind of randomly pressing, if you will. But now I'm gonna go back to my shaker, and there it is. And maybe let's see what happens if we make it repeat at a more frequent rate. So right now it's repeating at 16th notes, which is pretty neat. I like that. So let's see if we can record that in. Cool. So there's our shaker that's gone in. Very cool. And one thing that I did notice though is that in my entire recording process, I feel like some of these sounds are a little bit out of balance. Like I would like a lot more kick drum, and I would like a lot less of that shaker as much as I love it. So one thing that you can do is if you were to go to mix view again, you can see the entire drum track together. If you selected the name of this drum track again, it opens up and we're able to see all of the different levels for each of the individual drum sounds. So what I will do now is bump up the drum, but I'm gonna bring down the clap. Gonna keep the hi-hat around where it is. That looks pretty neat. But I'm also going to use these navigational buttons in this little cross section over here to navigate towards the maracas. Sorry, it wasn't a shaker specifically, but it was maracas. But now I'm gonna take the maracas down a little bit. So that's a little bit more well balanced as far as my sounds go. That's kind of like where I would like to be. It's a pretty happy place, and we can again come back to this a little bit later. But yeah, now let's head back over to our main drum group and close it back up so that we're very neat and organized, or as organized and neat as we can be for this purpose. Let's head over to our bass track again. One thing that I like to do a lot with basses is to be able to layer them, and in this case I like the high end of this bass sound a lot. I would like there to be more low end though. So one thing that I enjoy doing sometimes is adding a copy of the exact same bass sound but treating it differently with EQ, and also making sure that it's at a different level and in a different octave perhaps. So let's see if we can get that going. I'm gonna head back over to device view. So I'm gonna click that, and instead of moving on to the guitar yet, Nacho, please hang on, we'll be getting to you soon. I'm going to duplicate this entire bass track. So I'm gonna hold down duplicate and press on the track, and now I have a copy of the exact same bass sound. However, to this original bass sound, what I would like to now do is add a MIDI effect that I would like to introduce to you that's called pitch. So we're gonna head over to here, and right above the add track button, which we already use, we're gonna add a device. So we're gonna add a device that's a MIDI effect, and it's called pitch. And there's a lovely preset for this already that's called -12. So let's see what happens when we load that on. So now our bass is much lower. So we're going to bring that up. And if I head over into session mode again, let's launch this entire scene. So I still get that higher bass sound that I had, which is really awesome. Cool. So that's one way that I like working with these different kinds of sounds, if you will. I'm also going to go back because I promised myself just now that I would add in more cowbell. So let's see if we can find the cowbell. Ah, cool. There's our cowbell. There's our 808 cowbell. One thing that I will also show is that in Push, you not only can, I'm going to pause this for a second. So in Push, you can not only have one specific type of layout per track. For each of these different tracks, they each have different types of layouts. So if we look at our drum track, and if we press on this little button over here that says layout, let's see what we have. So suddenly we've had this lower right-hand quadrant become activated, and this is something that we call a 16 velocity layout. So this will let us play this particular cowbell with all these different velocities. So we're starting off at the most intense velocity over here, and then there's the quietest one over here. And I would like to pick one of the quieter ones now because I would like this to be a bit of a more gentle cowbell sound, if you will. And I think I would like to program in here. And I'm also going to, for the 16 velocities, I'm going to program it in, let's see, there and there. And I will also put them in here and here. Cool. So now if I listen to my drum clip again, and this time I'm going to solo the drum clip by holding down solo, which is next to mute, and pressing that. Cool. So these sound a little strange. I'm going to put them here instead. Cool. And now we can unsolo this drum clip. Cool. I also noticed that my cowbell is still a little bit out of control, so I'm going to decrease the maracas a little bit and also bring the cowbell down. Very cool. And now let's head back over here and close that up. Very cool. So we had a request for the guitar part from Nacho. So let's see if we can add that in as well. Right now I've got the rightmost track selected, which was my upper bass track. Let's add another track and let's make sure that it is a guitar. So now, they have all of these like different kinds of guitars, like indie dance type things. It would be useful to be able to hear this, so I'm going to turn preview on, and now I'm going to scroll through. Whoops. I'm going to scroll through all of these sounds. Guitar plucked. Ooh, whoops. These are mallets. They are not plucked sounds. These are plucked sounds. Excellent. Cool, that's pretty good. Jazz basic guitar. Let's pick that. Cool. So let's see if we can now add this. Let's add some basic jazz guitar, and then we'll see if we can spruce it up a little bit. So once again, I'm going to go into my mix view, and I'm going to bring the volume of this guitar down because it was a little loud. But I'm going to play everything so that I have a reference for time. Cool. Here we go. And I'm going to quantize that. Okay, cool. So my timing was pretty strange for that. So one thing that I could do is show you a little thing that I like to do from Push with the guitar solo. We're gonna head over into clip view over here. And instead of changing any of the notes, I'm going to change the loop length so that we have a very consistent kind of pattern happen. I'm going to do that by selecting this control over here, and this is actually going to shorten the loop over here. And that makes it a little bit different as well. But maybe instead I'm just going to re-record this in. So here we go. I'm going to hit delete over there. I'm going to unsolo this so that we hear everything, and let's make this better. Ooh. Undo that, delete that. Here we go. Ooh, much better. I'll quantize that a little bit so that's a little tighter. And now with this very simple type of jazz guitar quote-unquote sound that we have, let's add a couple of effects to it, which is probably like the best part about Push. You can do all of the effects straight from Push itself. And for this purpose, let's also switch back into device view. So let's do this, and let's call up a device, this time an audio effect. One thing that I like to do a lot for guitars is if it sounds a little bit thin, sometimes I put a chorus on it. So let's put on a chorus and see what that does. Kind of also adjust the mix of it from Push. So right now, like how I mentioned, a lot of Push's functions and functionality is based on the idea of like transforming and being chameleon-ish type things. Right now, this knob on the top is instead a control of how much chorus I'm hearing. So a lot of chorus, this is all the way up. And let's keep that around maybe about 37%. That's good. One thing that I will also add to this lovely guitar sound is another device that is called, up here, amp. Let's see what happens if we put on a clean sounding amp onto this guitar. So amp is a type of audio effect that is meant to simulate some things that you might use with a real life guitar or bass amp, and it has different settings that you can scroll through. So this is me scrolling through all these different settings. I liked clean though, that was pretty good. I'm going to decrease the treble but increase the bass a little bit on this, and let's also put in a bit more presence. Great. So now I'm going to add another device. I would like to compress this a little bit. So let's put in a compressor. And we can again go to audio effects, scroll down to compressor. And the great part about compressor is that it's one of those devices that shows you feedback on Push itself. So right now, if we take a look at this section of Push on the LED screen, this left portion, we're seeing a real-time audio version of the guitar, waveform version, of the guitar audio come in. And if I wanted to start compressing this, I would lower the threshold. and we hear the makeup gain coming into place. We also see the compression in real time as it's coming in. We can also change up the ratio. For guitars, I like to have a little bit of a higher ratio just to make things a little tighter. I'm also gonna decrease the attack, but increase the release a little bit. Very cool. Oh, we have a question. Excellent. I will pause this for a second. Yes, a question.
So the question is from Maya, and she said,
Hi, Maya.
can you record live from Push into Ableton? Could you just explain maybe a little about what the Push is and how it works with Ableton?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Thomas. So, just to repeat, we had a question about can you record live from Push into Ableton? And essentially, that was what I was doing. I recorded this guitar in live in real time, almost as like a looping type of hardware device that let me put all of the loops that you're seeing in Ableton Live now. So now I have my hand on the trackpad for those who are following along. All of these 4 clips that you saw here were all created from me using Push. I did not touch the computer. The only times I have touched the computer was right now, as well as when I was resizing a couple of the clips to illustrate a couple of the things that were going on in Push just now when I was trying to. Ooh, this is very interesting. I don't know if you can see this, Thomas, but I'm moving my mouse around in live, and it's like that was interesting. Wow, bizarre. If anyone knows why that happened. Oh, amazing. That's cool. That's so funny. But yeah, thank you for your question, Maya. And also in a little bit, we're going to look into some vocal looping things. So please stay tuned. And it won't necessarily be specific to vocal stuff, but it will be a real-time audio thing that we can start looking at. So that'll be pretty neat. But thanks for your questions. Very cool. So let's go back to this guitar part and just finish up a tiny little bit. We've compressed it. Let's add one more audio effect that will give us a little bit more oomph. And we'll call it, well, we won't call it. It already has a name, but it's going to be echo. Let's pull up let's try this preset called Clipped Slap Analog. So let's load that up, and now let's hear how it sounds. Whew. So now I'm going to unsolo the guitar, and we'll hear everything in the mix. Cool. One more thing that I will add in this case is maybe some kind of sustained sound. So when we're talking about music production, when we think of sustained sounds, generally a lot of the time we think of pads. So let's pull up a pad. Right now I have the guitar track selected, which means the next track I create is going to be to the right of it. So let's do add track, and we're going to add a MIDI track that's going to be a pad. So let's do that. And again, I have preview on, so it's letting me hear the different pads I have. Oh, that's pretty nice. Child's Play. Let's load that up. Ooh, awesome. Purple. Very cool. So let's see what happens now if I play on this. And I also probably want to be back in my mix view, like I mentioned. So pressing on the top right-hand corner. Yeah, that's kind of loud. So let's push this down a little bit. So similar to what I mentioned just now, being able to play an E minor scale as I have now on Push, I can also play chords. And I often tell people that the best way to start playing anything on Push is if you can hold your fingers in this position, like these 3 fingers showing up over here. If you can see my hand, I don't know if you can see my hand. I hope you can see it. It's like over Push. Cool. If you can hold these 3 fingers, you can play any simple chord on Push. So here we go. And these are all in the key of E minor. So let's maybe record some of this on. I like that, how that was sounding. Yeah, let's do that. So Maya, this will illustrate a little bit of the real-time recording that's happening. If you can keep an eye on both Push and Live to see how one is reacting to the other. Let's see how this goes. So yeah, yeah, all of those were just recorded in real time, which is awesome. So yeah, that's one way that you can start building up different sections with Push. One more thing that I would like to add to this is maybe some kind of, let's see, some other kind of chordal sound, maybe a little bit less sustained, a little bit shorter. And when I think of another chord type of sound that's shorter, I often think of mallets. The category of mallets in Ableton Live is a full sound category. So let's take a look at that. Let's go to add track. We'll add another MIDI track, and it's going to be a mallet. So here we go. Ooh, lovely, lovely mallets. Cool. Let's add this bells deep sound, and I'm going to hit load to load it up. And it's going to create a new track. It is colored pretty similarly to this track over here, so I'm just going to quickly color it a different color by holding down Shift, pressing on the name of the track, and let's make it a nice chartreuse. I've never said that word in so long. I'm so happy to be able to say it. And again, with this, we already have our groove going, which is working pretty well for us now. Let's take a look at a different layout. We've looked at the different layouts in a drum rack. Let's take a look at some different layouts over here. If I click on the layout button once while I'm in a mode that lets me play notes, the first part that I'll get is something called the sequencer. If I click on layout one more time, oh, whoops, sorry, overclicked. I'll get something that says sequencer plus 32 notes. And what this is that this lower section of Push over here is letting me select, say, certain chords. But the top section of Push is going to be the same as the step sequencer. So it's going to let me put in notes into specific parts of a step sequence that I would like to do. So maybe that's what I'll do instead. I'm going to also increase the octave. And I'm going to maybe select a higher octave, maybe. I like that. I like that seventh. That's a minor seventh, and I think it sounds pretty nice for what we're about to do. So I will go back into my mix window as well and decrease this a little bit. And let's listen to everything that we have together. I have this going, so I'm trying to think of where I would put these in. Maybe over here. Solo this now, we can actually hear what is happening. That's the bell pattern. I'm soloing out of it. There we are. I'm gonna solo this again. And the great thing about being in this particular mode when you're doing melodic stuff, which I'm a big fan of, is if you were to press on clip over here, you can now see the notes that you're playing with. And let's say, I kind of liked all of these, but I would like for them to be a little bit less on the grid, maybe a little bit more loose. So one thing that I can do is if I were to select this and hold down, I can then have the option of nudging this from left to right. And you can see this immediately happening on Push. You can see that I'm nudging this by a certain percentage. So maybe I'll have it a little bit laid back. I'll have it back like 12%, let's see. And another thing that I could also do, and maybe I'll do this with another note, is, yeah, I'll do it with this one over here. I can choose how many steps this note is. So I can do that by turning this knob over here. So now this, and you'll be able to see that reflected on Push also. So now this note is 4 steps long over here. And I also have the option of changing velocities. So maybe for this particular note, I want this to be very, very strong. And for this note, I would like it to be a little softer. So here we go. So a little bit more variation to our loop. And let's unsolo. Let's mix this a little bit. Awesome, another question.
So somebody is asking, does Push work with VST and plugins, and specifically messing with parameters or doing automation?
Cool. That's an excellent question. And the answer is, for most part, yes, in some capabilities. So right now I'm using, for those of you who are on the live stream, this version of Live that you're seeing is on our school computer at 343 Labs. So I'm not exactly sure what VSTs we have loaded on, but let's take a look and let's see. Okay, cool. Yeah, this is an excellent question. Thank you for all the questions. Please keep them coming. We're going to be here until about 8:30 or so. So there's lots of time for us to explore and answer a couple of different questions that people have. So yeah, let's do the VST things. Right before I do that though, I will show you, as far as this guitar sound goes, I noticed that I was having a little bit of trouble hearing it in the mix, and I almost feel it's because there was a lot of lower end in it that maybe I didn't need, and it was clashing a little bit with these other bass sounds that we had. So I'm gonna add a different audio effect to it again. I'm gonna head over to device so that we see it. I have this entire chain of things going on. So behind echo, let's add in an EQ. And again, this is one of my favorite things to do from Push because you can get a lot of visual things from it. So let's do audio effects. Let's add on an EQ 8. And let's just do the default. So let's load that in. The amazing thing now is that we can see a real-time updated version of this in Push's screen itself. So let's pull up a high-pass filter, which is a low-cut filter also. So it cuts the lows. And let's put it over here, and let's bring it up a little bit. So you should be able to hear the audible difference now. This is with the, frequency knob turned all the way up. Let's bring it down a little to here. And I also want a little bit of a less intense roll-off, so I'm going to change it to a slightly gentler slope. And I think that gives us a good kind of mix. I'm going to boost that a little at the resonant frequency, and I'm going to bring this frequency knob a little bit higher. So let's unsolo, and let's hear. Let's also add in a little bit of a shelf. That means I can lift frequencies at a certain point. So we'll do that with, let's do that with the last band. And let's make that a shelf. And let's bring the gain up just a tiny bit. And you can hear more of that attack from the guitar coming in, which is kind of what I want. Maybe a little bit higher, maybe around 3K. Cool. It's a little bit too much, I think. About 4 dB looks good as a boost. Great, so now we have this thing coming through. Let's see if we can add now, next to our bells that we added, a new track with some VSTs. So let's scroll down over here. Again, we're in browser and we're able to look at the different categories we have. In Live, VSTs are under the category that's called plugins. And you'll be able to search for them as audio units, which are the ones that pertain to Apple computers. So if you're running a MacBook, you will see audio units or VSTs. And let's take a look at some of them. Let's see what we have over here. Cool. Cool. It looks like we have some really interesting Arturia stuff. So let's pull that up. And let's pull up... Oh my god, so many of them! Oh, I love Modular V. Okay, random segue. Let's pull up one that will be pretty relevant to us as far as layers go. Yeah, let's try Modular V3. So once I have that selected, I can again press load. Cool. And it might take a second because it's a VST. So now, if you are following us... Oh dear. Thank you for installing Quick Tour. No, thank you. We would not like the tour. We do not want a tour. We're having some pop-ups on here. Cool. Great. So now we're able to see that in this particular VST, we do not have any control over some of these parameters that we might be tweaking, but we can still play it. So Modular V is still going to play for me. I still have the ability to loop it if I wanted to. So maybe let's add a little bit of it in. We won't be able to control it from the knobs this time, though certain VSTs will allow you to do so. So let's see if we can just record a little bit of a loop to add to our current groove that we have. So here we go. Maybe in a higher octave. Ooh, that's neat. That's pretty cool. Here we go. Quantize that. And now, very quickly, I have all of these tracks, and they're all very lovely. They're all lovely, lovely MIDI tracks. But I would love to do some audio, and it would be nice to also maybe record some things in real time. So let's do that. I'm going to close out of the modular V interface that we see over here. I'm also going to make sure that I have the modular V3 track selected so that when I create a new track, it's going to be added next to it. And I'm going to hit add track. And this time, I'm going to create an audio track. And I'm just going to load up a default audio track over here. Cool. So right now we have a default audio track loaded up here. It's colored in blue. What I will do is color it maybe a slightly different color, because for me, I feel like vocals are always some kind of pink. So here we go. There are our pink vocals. And right now we're not hearing anything. If you're looking at me, well, there isn't actually a version of me looking at this, but let's see if we can make this work. So I am holding a microphone. And you can't hear me speak into this microphone yet because I don't have specific settings set up for it. But you can also do this straight from Push. So right now I have my audio track selected. I'm going to click on Mix. And if I click on Mix once, it takes me to this global audio section, if you will. If I hit Mix again, it takes me to a per track audio level mixer. And from Push itself, you can see that our second soft button on the top says something called Input and Output. So let's select that. And now we're able to, from Push, choose our specific input and output. And you'll notice that this is already detecting some kind of input level coming in, which is great news. All I need to do now is make sure that I have this track record enabled. So I'm going to hold down this track. And once it lights up in red, that means we've armed the track for recording. So it's going to be ready to record in whatever I am going to sing in. If I were to sing something in. So yeah, let's sing something in. I'm going to click on Mix again to take us back to our default view. A big question that is often asked by some folks is, why is this suddenly grayed out? And that's because we currently have monitoring off. If you look at live, you'll notice that the monitoring is off in the monitoring section. If I wanted to, I could turn it on. But for looping purposes, sometimes I find that it's best off. So that's something that we'll explore in the next couple of minutes or so. And yeah, let's take a look at this. So let's play my loop. Well, that's pretty neat. Maybe I'll think of some kind of vocal parts that I can add to it, and also decrease the volume of everything else so that I'm not drowning myself out. A very poor performance of that. So again, I'm going to delete this and redo it. Here we go. Oh, I'm going to redo that again. Ooh, that's a little better. I'm also going to add a couple of other audio effects to it. So let's go to Add Device. Let's first put on an EQ to cut out any low end that might have been coming through in my vocal. So let's put on an EQ8. There we go. We're going to go all the way to the first band and put on a high pass filter. Cool. That sounds pretty alright. Pretty decent, workable vocal performance. Definitely not the best, but let's add another device and spruce this up a little bit. Let's go to audio effects and let's put on these lovely, lovely effects happening. Let's put on a phaser. And let's solo this. So this phaser is currently changing the quality of my voice in a pretty subtle way. But I would like this to be able to, kind of have a little bit of color to it. So great, we have a phaser on. And let's see now if we can put on another additional audio effect. Let's put on a little bit of overdrive, which is a little bit of distortion. Maybe not too much though. Let's bring this down. And you notice that yes, my voice is starting to sound less like a voice and more like something else, although I'm not sure exactly what it would sound like. Cool. Let's bring the drive up and bring the overall volume down. Great. So now one more device that I would like to add another audio effect. Let's put on let's put on echo again, and let's this time start from scratch with a preset. Cool. So the cool thing about echo, which came out in Live 10, is that you can craft delays in a very lovely way, as well as reverbs. So right now I'm going to put the dry wet to about 35%. That sounds good. I'm also going to make the divisions and repetitions of the echoes that you hear after me a little bit of a different length. Maybe quarter notes is good. And I'm also going to make them regular. I would also like to make the echoes themselves more filtered, which I can do over here. Cool. Now, very similar to what I mentioned with going into the deeper menus of a lot of these devices in Push, if I were to click on Echo again, let's see what happens. Oh, now we have all of these wonderful options come up and all of these lovely soft buttons get activated to give us more options. I'm going to click on Global. And from here, this is where I can actually control some reverb. So let's see what we can hear. Reverb level. Can also control how wide the reverb is. So I kind of like that. Let's see how it sounds in the context of everything. Awesome. What I would like to do is maybe record a second layer of vocals that maybe accompanies this first existing layer. So what I'm going to do is duplicate this existing track. So I'm going to hold down duplicate and press this track. Ooh, not sure if that worked. Try that again. Ooh. Think maybe getting a little bit of a tantrum from live. Let's try that again. Ah, there we go. Perfect. So yeah, now we have two copies of the same track. If I wanted to, I could have both of these armed at the same time by holding the second one down as well. So now both of these tracks are armed. The way that you would set this up is unfortunately not from Push, but this is something that you would deal with in your settings in Live. So let's quickly go over to Live for a second. I'm hitting Command, comma to access my preferences. And in the audio section of this, not in the audio section, but in the record section of this, there's a section that says exclusive, and you want to make sure that you have ARM unchecked. So that means ARM exclusive means you can only ARM one thing at a time, but we want to ARM multiple things at a time so that we can do some really neat things about it. So we're going to make sure that that's not activated, and then we're going to close out our preferences. And that should be enough for us to deal with. So now if I were to launch this entire first row, let's see what happens. Right, so we have two versions of the same clip. I don't want that, so I'm going to hold down delete and delete that. And instead, I'm going to layer on a second layer, maybe a harmony with this. So here we go. Cool, there we go. Maybe I'll mix it a little bit also so that they're balanced in the right way. Generally, I like to mix higher harmonies slightly lower than their originals because higher frequencies tend to be picked up more easily by the ear. So having the original melody a little bit louder than anything that's harmonizing with it tends to be a really good workflow to keep in mind. Did we have a question?
Yeah,
awesome, cool.
So the first one is kind of related to Maya's question. It is, can the Push be used as a standalone drum machine or sample box without connecting to Ableton?
Excellent question. And unfortunately, the answer is no. The Push must be connected to Ableton Live in order to access all of its wonderful live features. You'll also notice that the push, as far as being a unit goes, there's nothing on the back that really functions as like an audio interface or lets you plug your headphones into it or anything. So it's really meant to be paired with a laptop, or paired with another kind of software that you have in your computer. So that's an excellent question. It's not standalone yet. Maybe one day. That's a great question.
And the second question was, can you mess with or change slash automate the clip envelope from push?
Yes, you can do that. So, that's a great question. I'll just repeat that second question again because it was a little bit more in detail. The question was, can you automate a clip envelope from push? And the answer is yes. So if we keep in mind when clip automation is relevant, it's relevant whenever we're working in session view. Usually, clip automation will not be done in arrangement view because in arrangement view, you're working with linear automation that's running from left to right. Over here, though, you can absolutely record in clip automation. So let's do that for maybe one of our clips that we were dealing with. Let's use our what was a cool sound that we had? Thomas, what sound should we automate? Maybe if Thomas wants to make a suggestion.
The ones that are in here. Maybe the bass sound.
Yeah, maybe the bass sound. That's a good call. Cool. So let's do that. I'm going to solo the bass sound now. Let's see if we can hear that. Ah, okay, cool. And it also ended up being softer. I'll set that back to negative 31 later. But for now, we're focusing on this. I'm also going to switch over to device view. Cool. And we're going to make sure we have it selected. Cool. Excellent. So now that we are in device view on this particular bass house clip, let's see if we can manipulate a couple of these options. So I'm going to head over to the filter on this particular bass patch. This bass patch is created in one of Ableton Live's instruments called operator. So we're able to control some of its frequency options here. Maybe increase the resonance a little. Cool. So just for the sake of it, let's see if we can record some automation in. What I'm going to do is make sure that I have this button over here in red on the bottom left of push. It's called automate. I'm going to make sure that's selected. And this corresponds to the automation button that you'll have in Live's transport. So I'm going to toggle it on and off. And you should see the same button also correspondingly toggle on and off in Live. It's going to be on the top control bar. We're going to make sure we have that on. And now when I hit record to overdub a couple of things, let's see if we can change the filter and frequency and resonance on it. To make sure that it's recorded. And has it recorded? Oh, it hasn't. Why? Let's see if we can figure out why. Ah, there we go. Goodness. There we go. So now that I've done that, you'll notice that the filter is kind of automatically moving on its own, and you can see it wiggle around in the interface on push as well. So yes, you can do clip automation from push. Another great thing you can also do with most things on push is delete things. So in this case, if I wanted to delete this particular automation for the filter frequency and the resonance, I can do so by holding down delete and lightly tapping on the knobs that were affecting the filter frequency and the filter resonance. So delete, tap, and tap. And we set things back to its default. Great questions. So I'm going to lower this back to minus 30 because that was where I had it. And do we have any more questions so far, or looks okay? Awesome, cool. Thank you, Thomas, and thank you everyone who's asking questions. We have about 20 minutes left. So I'm going to show you now with that how we can then go about creating an arrangement from this, and one thing that I like to do when creating arrangements. So first of all, one thing that I enjoy doing is having different kinds of scenes to work with. So right now you'll notice that all of my clips are in one particular scene horizontally in Live, and you can also see this reflected on push as well. I think it would be really cool if I could have multiple scenes of the same scene just to work with, because I would like this to be my drop, but maybe I want there to be things that precede the drop that are a little bit maybe building up to the drop. So involving lots of layers, involving lots of clips in that sense. So let's hold down the duplicate button again. And once I do that, I'm going to select this entire scene. So duplicate. And now I have a complete duplication of the first scene. I'm going to duplicate this a couple more times. So then maybe I have... Now I have a literal 8x8 grid of all of my clips. What I will do now, though, is take things away. So maybe I want my chorus to be somewhere in the middle of the structure of this song. And I want fewer parts in other sections of my song. So I'm going to delete. I only want the lower bass to come in during the drop, so I'm going to delete the vocals. I only want them to come in at. And actually, maybe I'll do a type of structure that has a post-chorus as well as the actual chorus. So the post-chorus will have the vocal tops. So I'm going to duplicate this existing one. So these two rows with everything in them are currently going to be my chorus and drop, except I'm going to take out vocals for this. So delete. Cool. So this is going to be my chorus part. And my intro will probably start with, delete that. We'll probably start with these 3 parts on top. So let's go. Or actually, no, let's delete that. So I'll start off my song with this as the intro. Oops. Going to duplicate that again, make sure they're all there. So I'll start off with the chords as my intro. Maybe add in the higher bass. And then start building with the drums. Ooh, that's something to think about. I just soloed the drums because I noticed that when I was bringing in the drums, that seemed really, 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 stark in a way, like starting to really come in very quickly. Let's see if we can make a copy of this current clip and parse it down a little bit. So I'm gonna hold down duplicate, and I'm going to duplicate this to the first slot over here. And I'm going to go back into my note mode, so that I can see whatever's going on. I think in the first part of this, I would like there to not be the shaker, because the shaker is very upbeat. So let's delete the shaker. Let's also take out the hi-hat. Let's also take out the cowbell for now. Cool. So this seems like it could be a pretty cool start to whatever I'm doing. So now I have a little bit of like an intro type of clip. And in this clip over here, I want to also parse it down a little bit more. So I'm going to go over to note, and in this one, I'll take out the shaker. So it's adding in the cowbell and adding in the hi-hat. Cool. So let's go back into note. I'm going to unsolo that. And now in session view, this is kind of like my intermediary section that I have. And in fact, I only want the bells to come in say the second verse. So let's take these out. Cool. One really interesting way that I like to transition between sections also is to just stop the drums completely, drop them out, and then bring everything back in very quickly. So let's groove on this for a little bit. Drums out and back in. And here's the big chorus coming up after this. So it has some of my audio clips rather. Delete a couple of the rows below because I don't think I'll need them for this particular performance. So again, deleting entire scenes. So one thing that I did like about this clip is that it had a very minimalistic type of feel to it. This drum clip over here, it was just kick and clap. So one thing that I will do is I will copy this to this particular row over here that's going to be a little bit like our breakdown type of section. So I'm going to hold duplicate, select this clip, and put it over there. And now if I pressed this scene and take it out solo, I've got everything that I have, but maybe I want to take out the bass part for this breakdown as well. So delete the bass parts. And delete the vocals. And delete modular V, because he's kind of like adding a lot of stuff. I'll keep Nacho's indie guitar in, because that's pretty cool. Great. One thing that might also be useful for me is if I had some kind of global effects on this entire thing, maybe to transition between sections or to take me out of specific parts of things. So one thing that I will do is to the master track, which I can also select here, and you'll see me select this in live as well correspondingly, is if I click on master, it's going to take me to the master track, and I want to be able to add in some kind of device onto the master track itself. In this case, I'm going to see if I can put on a filter. Maybe a filter will be cool. So I'm going to head over to audio effects. I'm going to select something called auto filter, and we're just going to select the default auto filter. But let's do that. So let's play everything now, and let's select let's see, a high pass filter should be cool. Cool. So this could be pretty cool. It could be a way that we start getting out of our drum effects. Or maybe this could be our intro. Another thing that you can also do is not only add specific individual devices that are audio effects, but you can also add in racks. So let's do that. What I'm going to do is delete this device from the master altogether. I'm going to hold down delete and press on auto filter. Now it's gone. Bye-bye. I'm going to add another device though, and this time it's going to be an audio effect rack. One thing that I really enjoy looking at is the performance and DJ section of this, because they have some really neat effects. And I'm going to use a knob that's called fade to gray. This is a little bit of a combinational effect that has different audio effects added and condensed together, if you will. But in this case, if I were to play my current selection, and if I were to move this one knob, we kind of get like a variety of things happening all at once. And that could be useful for us to play with. Let's also add back another type of filter, but this time instead of using the auto filter that I used just now, I'm going to use the low pass filter. So it'll be this one. It lets lows come through and it cuts out highs. So let's do this. Let's see if we can perform this song and see what happens when we get to places. So let's start. Here we go. Cool. So that was an example of how you might go about using Push to create an arrangement and just start getting into the workflow of being able to work just from hardware. And all of this was basically created only from Push. The only times I ever had to touch Push were when I was, showing you things that were specifically in Live, like the interface of the modular V, or how to resize a clip from Live directly, which you can also do from Push in clip view if you were to look over at clip view in whatever track you have selected. Again, that's through clip view. If you had a clip selected, you'll be able to see it playing. Cool. Do you have any more questions so far?
There's no more questions.
Okay.
I have a question for you.
Yeah, sure. So Thomas has a question.
So my question is, what is your favorite thing about the push, or why do you like the push so much, or use it so much?
Sure.
And then the second part of the question is, would you recommend the push for a beginner with Ableton?
Okay, that's an excellent question. So just to echo what Thomas's two questions were. The very first question was what is my favorite part about Push? Honestly, I like that it's so great for performance. I think like if a lot of you are familiar with my work, maybe you are. I don't know. I don't know. Sometimes I don't only teach, but I'm also an artist and I do a lot of music as well. But I love Push for live performances and I often have it tilted at an angle so that audiences can see what I'm doing. And I like that you can play with clips in a non-linear fashion. Like you can jump between different sections. You can do lots of great things as far as like playing melodies goes. Like if you wanted to, you could theoretically you could even solo on this. Like let's say you were on the bass track, you could play like different types of notes. You could even use expressive ways. So for example, if you wanted to hold down a note, and again, that's something that you will be able to record into a clip if you wanted to. So I've ended up playing Push like a lead guitar sometimes, which is pretty interesting. And if there are any guitarists out there on the live stream, holler if you're a guitarist or a bass player. But you may like this. So if you go into scale layout on Push, which I talked about just now, there is a mode for you to be in that's called Chromatic Mode. And this is exactly the same layout as you would find on a guitar. So this may be appealing to you. And this is actually the mode that I usually play in because this lets me have all of the chromatic notes. So it's doing all the notes in between, all 12 notes in a chromatic scale. But yeah, you can also play in key, in which case you can play according to scales, condensed up. But yeah, so I think I just like it in general because it's that flexible. I've done gigs before where it's just me and Push, not just for live electronic performance, but for live DJing even. Like I do live DJing with that because you can start getting really fancy with some things on Push, like even the user modes that are highly customizable. You can also do lovely stuff like vocal looping with it, which is probably a big thing of mine that I love. Usually I'll have like the same kind of audio setup, but what I'll do is that instead of having just like 2 tracks, I'll basically do like 8 version looping systems. So I'll have 8 of these all set up, and I'll be able to loop consistently between 2 different tracks. So that's always a pretty fun thing to consider. And the second question that Thomas had was, would I recommend this to a beginner using Ableton Live? Despite me working very closely with Ableton and being a certified trainer, I wouldn't recommend this as your first purchase. I would say it's always the most important to know the software that you're using first. But I would say if you love Ableton Live and you've been using it and you are looking for a first controller to have that's not a first DAW, but a first controller, like a first physical unit, then Push is an excellent choice. So I would recommend Push in that case.
So we have one other question.
Cool.
Is how much time did you spend with the push before you were comfortable using it in a live situation?
That's an excellent question. So the question was, how long did I spend with Push before I started using it in a live situation? To be honest, I do think it differs from person to person. I will also preface this entire thing by saying that I do have music theory training and music background before this. I was trained as a classical pianist, and like I mentioned, I play a little bit of guitar. I play flute as well. So I have a lot of music background and music theory knowledge. So it made a lot more sense for me to pick things up quickly once I started making connections between things. Like I would be able to associate, like, okay, here's this is exactly how you would play like a scale, like upwards, if you needed to do that. So it was easier for me to make connections between what's going on and what I want to perform, and then being able to put it and adapt it for Push. So, but the answer to the exact question of time, um, I would say yeah. By this time, I've probably put in my 10,000 hours into trying to learn something. But I still have so much to go. I feel like Push. This is only the beginning of my journey with Push, even though I've used it for so long now. And very often, like in terms of live performance, it's just so customizable. You can do so many things with it. What I briefly touched on just now and brought up was the idea of user mode. Basically, if you very quickly, without nerding out too much, if you touch on this top right hand corner called user over here, it puts Push into user mode, and any of these pads and knobs become akin to what you would do with a normal MIDI controller. So you can do custom mappings. You don't have to be controlling Ableton Live exclusively. You can do other kinds of MIDI mappings that you might want to do. But then the moment you come out of user mode, you're back into that control with Live. So I love that customization. And yeah, I would say as far as maybe not in terms of hours, but in terms of, let's say, like time, like months and days and weeks and stuff. I think the first time I performed live with Push, it was it was a couple months after I had borrowed one from a friend first. I didn't even like buy one until I think a couple of shows into it. I borrowed it from a friend and also borrowed it from my school because the school that I attended had a couple of Push units available. So yeah, probably a couple months. Consistent work. I think like even if you can't practice for long periods of time, I would almost argue that consistency is more important than being able to spend like, oh, I want to spend 3 hours today. Like it wouldn't. I feel like it makes a lot less sense if you do like, oh, I'll do 3 hours today, and then 2 weeks from now I'll do another 3 hours. I think it would make a lot more sense. Based off my personal experience, especially as I work with kids and a lot of beginners, that you practice for 5 minutes a day with the utmost concentration that you can on Push, and that is, I think, more effective. Practicing smart rather than practicing extensively. So, great question. Cool. Awesome. Yeah, let's wrap it up. And right before we wrap up, though, I just wanted to make a couple of quick announcements. But yeah, given the current COVID situation, I hope everyone's doing safe at home. Hopefully, you're watching this from the safety of your home, and if you're not out. But yeah, there will be lots of ongoing online classes that 343 is starting to do. Starting even from March 21st, we have 2-day workshops on the weekend, and you can have all of this information available on Instagram if you follow us at instagram.com/343labs. That's the number 343 followed by LABS. And there's a full schedule there for a couple of 2-day workshops that we have, 5-day workshops as well as in-depth courses that are a little bit longer. So things like 6 weeks, twice a week meetings, 12 sessions, those kinds of things available. For me in particular, I am teaching a couple of classes, not just for general beginners, but also for kids. Because for those of you who know my work, you'll probably also know that I'm very active working with young people. Huge fan of working with kids. So if you know of kids who are interested in music production, let me know, or let them know. I will be teaching some Ableton 2-day courses on 21st and 22nd of March. Those are going to be Saturday and Sunday from 3:15 to 5 p.m. on both days. And the week after that, it's going to be the same thing as a weekend intensive on the 28th and 29th of March. So after that, I'm also going to be doing a 5-day intensive, a week-long thing that's going to be from March 30th to April the 2nd. That's going to be on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. It's going to be 6:15 to 8 p.m. on all of those days. And then I'm going to be doing a kids session also from March 23rd to April 17th. That's going to be meeting Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 3:45 to 5:30 p.m., which is kind of similar to a lot of the after-school programming that I did. So if you know a kid who would like to do some after-school stuff, let them know. Let me know. And I'm also going to be doing some music theory stuff on the 23rd and 24th of March. That's going to be Monday, Tuesday as an intensive, and it's going to be 1:15 to 3 p.m. on both of those days. I'll be posting about these on my social media platforms, so you'll find announcements from me on Instagram. That's going to be instagram.com/dolltrick, DOLLTRICK. And you'll also find similar information on the 343 Labs Instagram and website. On our website is 343labs.com, so you can find us over there. And if there are no further questions, thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. This was really, really fun to be able to share with y'all about one of my favorite things in life at the moment, Push. Thank you again to 343 Labs for having us. Thanks, Thomas, who's in the room managing everything. And yeah, I think that's probably it. Yeah. Don't forget to subscribe to us. Yeah, on 343 Labs YouTube channel. That's going to be youtube.com/343labs as well. So thanks for tuning in, y'all. Bye.